we believe gaming will really put DeFi on a hockey stick from a large perspective. We think DeFi is great from an infrastructure perspective, but what you want are real users leveraging it in a very transparent way, right? So we think that's going to drive the DeFi adoption on Sui further from what it's already driven already. That's our big bet.
Chaos Labs, the leading on-chain risk management firm, recently launched its new flagship Oracle product, Edge. Edge delivers integrated, high-precision risk and price data for any application with a market. Follow and reach out to Chaos Labs on X to learn more.
What's up, guys? Just want to tell you a little bit more about Fuel Labs and their new Ethereum L2 Fuel Ignition. So Fuel Labs is launching Fuel Ignition, a high-performance ETH L2 powered by their Fuel VM. With the launch of Ignition, the team is also launching Phase 2 for their Fuel Points program to reward users and promote growth. Make sure to check out fuel.network to learn more. Nothing said on 0x Research is a recommendation to buy or sell securities or tokens. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and any views expressed by anyone on the show are solely our opinions, not financial advice. Boccaccio, Ryan, and our guests may hold positions in the companies, funds, or projects discussed. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of 0x Research. Today I'm joined by Adeniyi, who is the co-founder and CPO at Mysten Labs, who are building Sui and Walrus protocol. Thanks for joining us, Adeniyi.
Good morning. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Usually I'll ask people to introduce what they're building, but I don't think we really need to do that here. So I'm just going to start off with what's like your personal vision for Sui and what is the thesis for move adoption?
Yeah, great. Thanks for inviting me. So I've shared with the public that I remember when we first did our fundraising for Mysten, we had this very embarrassing deck that had like a spaghetti bolognese setup of like multiple protocols. I think it stems from the fact that when we were at Facebook, we were trying to build a layer for making money to send as easy as email. And when we left Mysten, we saw a distinct opportunity that ultimately, look, every asset is going ultimately digital. The internet is great for moving data around, but it's not really good at like streamlining user engagement across a multitude of platforms in an atomic way. So if you have a world of multiple assets, how do you allow users to coordinate their actions on these assets across a multitude of services and service providers in a way that's very frictionless? So we knew that was an opportunity, and then we didn't know, we also thought one platform couldn't do it. We believe that the internet ultimately needed an upgrade, and this upgrade comes in services that allows you to do that in a fully permissionless way. So we, in our diagram that we had drawn, I don't know if anyone has seen it, it was somehow leaked, I don't know how. We had a multitude of protocols that solve different types of problems, and you start to see that with Mysten now. We started by building Sui, which is a universal coordination layer for digital assets. I don't like calling it layer one, but you know, here it's an L1 is what people call it, but it's bigger than that. It's solving a problem that's much more larger. Sui itself doesn't have a maximum throughput that most blockchains designed to have today. It's able to scale horizontally, which is how we took our learnings from building search at Google and building infra at Facebook. How you build systems that are ultimately, they increase capacity as you add more machines to them. No other blockchain does that. It's got primitives that allows you to build assets and coordinate assets in an atomic way using what we call programmable transaction blocks. So I can streamline up to 1,024 independent transactions together or coordinated transactions together and submit it with one signature, and it's done. And then the next layer we're building on top of that is Walrus. Walrus is a fully decentralized blob store that is going to power the next wave of websites. It's going to power how AI, how you have data integrity across large language models and multitude of other use cases. I believe we have companies who are building data availability layers, leveraging Walrus for that as well. So we believe you're going to need a multitude of stacks, and the next stack we're probably going to do after that is something related to networking. So fundamentally, our thesis is the internet is great for moving data. It's not great for coordinating user activities around digital assets. My storage is going to be a digital asset. My concert ticket is a digital asset. Things that I do is a digital asset. And to coordinate my engagement across a multitude of services, you need a platform or a set of platforms to do that. So that's our big bet, and we believe it's the right bet to make.
That's perfect. I want to dive into Sui first, and then I want to talk a bit about Walrus as well, because I've been reading up on it. I'm very excited to hear about it. But specifically with regard to Sui, so I think one thing that's slightly unfair is that you constantly have a competitor, a very clear competitor. I don't think a lot of blockchains have to deal with that. But what do you think your competitive advantage is against other move-based chains?
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say Sol. I really,
Coming
so,
as well.
yeah. So honestly, we think it's a good idea that multiple chains adopt to move. Quite frankly, we've made a statement that we think it's near impossible to secure the EVM. It's just not going to happen. We tried at Facebook, we looked at it, and we ultimately resulted in building a brand new programming language called Move. And you have the likes of Aptos who build on Move. You have Sui building on Move. I believe IOTA is going to launch a Move chain. There's something on AVAX launching. You have Movement that's building on Move. The more Move developers, the better it is for Web3, period. And we emphatically believe that. So we welcome that. We just believe that the platform we built is far superior because everything was designed from the bottom up. When we left Facebook, we left behind the infrastructure and architecture that we had designed and built called Libra. One of our competitors built on that primitive. We had grander visions to build something that's beyond scale what we were doing at Facebook. Libra was meant to be almost a permission network to a large extent with a consortium. It was not meant to deal with scale at the kind of levels that we think the internet needs to go. So we started from scratch. So we built a fundamental platform that basically has object-oriented principles from day one. It deals with congestion by design. It's horizontally scalable by design. And it's probably the most delightful platform to build on. Some of the devs who have come from Solana have said building on Sui is a 10x improvement on building on Solana, for example. So dev experience is something we've been able to focus on day one. Building on the previous version of Move, sort of like what you have the IOTA and Aptos using, is almost like writing an account-based programming language, right? It's almost similar to ETH. And we do not think the mass majority of developers are going to work with that paradigm. Most things you build in the world aren't account-based. They're object-based. It's an object-based system. We think of objects. This phone is an object. My wallet is an object. And if I'm transacting with my wallet, I'm transacting on my phone, they're two different transactions. You should be able to do that in parallel, right? So most blockchains do not do that. And I think we've designed it from a very basic principle of, okay, how do I allow people to build an application that can onboard millions of users? We invented something called ZKlogin. ZKlogin is a mechanism that lets you create a Web3 account using your Web2 credentials in a fully permissionless way. So whoever your Web2 provider is, if it's Google, Facebook, or Kakao, whatever, does not even know you're signing to a Web3 application. Separately from that, we have something called sponsor transactions. So sponsor transactions lets you transact without paying gas. Someone else can pay the gas on your behalf, whether you watch an ad to pay for gas or a wallet decides to cover it because you trade on their favorite DAX. Great. And then finally, we have three name services as well. So you're on board with your Google account or you're on board with your Facebook account or whatever you want. You get a username that is Web3 related. So it's Adeniyi, just at Adeniyi, like at notation. And I could send money to you like I send like email, never have to worry about gas. So we believe the next platform needs to be able to onboard users at a scale that's never been afforded to them in Web3. Most people in Web3 are building as though we're building for a very small subset of users. We believe that Sui will onboard more users into Web3 than any other platform just because we've built for large scale, we built large scale infrastructure before that's had to tailor to billions of users. And that experience is very, very unique within Mysten. So I believe if I had to compare the biggest comparison, yeah, we have a great stack. The most scalable blockchain, the fastest finality, the most descriptive language we have to build smart contracts. But ultimately, I think our team really, really sets us aside from every other team in the space. People struggle to launch one platform, but we're launching a multitude of platforms, and we could do that really well.
I think you teased at a lot of points here in relation to some competitors and kind of differentiating Sui and the stack here. I guess maybe to just re-highlight some high level things, like what are maybe the top kind of meaningful differences between like a Solana and a Sui, for example, and then like taking that further, I think you kind of started to get into this point as well, but like where and how does Sui differentiate itself, and then capture market share away from a Solana or even like the EVM as it is dominant today as well?
So the first one is developer experience. Building on Sui is it's light years ahead of building on Sol in terms of just the dev experience. You're afforded tools like ZKlogin, afforded tools like object composability. you basically have congestion control dealt with intrinsically in the way the data platform is, intrinsically in how the data model is designed. So as a developer, you don't have to really understand the fundamental platform. You can just build, and most of these things are taken care of for you. You don't have to worry about sharding. So from a Solana, if you had to compare it to Sol, latency on Sui is, I think, 8 to 12x lower than on Sol. So if I trade on Sui, finality is instant, right? It's less than a second. Sol's about 8 seconds or more, depending on the network congestion. And Sui, up to 100,000 transactions per second, you're still a second. End-to-end finality, not optimistic, no forks. It's simple end-to-end finality. Separately, I believe the ability to scale infinitely, right? Like, we hate quoting TPS or max TPS because that's a red flag. Google does not say, I can only handle 50 apps. And after that, good luck, the fees go up, right? So Sui allows you to add more validators, so as validator to add more infrastructure. So as a network starts to top out at 297,000 transactions per second, we're not going to get anywhere anytime soon. They can add a second worker or a third worker. And we've been able to represent that if you 7x the amount of hardware for the network, you get 7x the performance and 0 increase in latency. And this has been formally proven. So Sui is also formally proven in its algorithms and the architecture. Solana is not. So these are the things. If you're going to build infrastructure that's going to carry the world's money, you need to have formal proof that this thing actually works, right? Like, it's not, trust me, bro, or hand waving. You have to actually be sure that what you're building on is going to stand the test of time. So our team has, I can't remember the full number, it's a myriad of top academics in the space who are also practical in the space, that are able to apply the theory into practice, and also the engineering that can build it at a high fidelity and speed. And it's shown. So I think if I had to summarize a few things, I think for sure the capacity for Sui is elastic. It can scale horizontally, which Solana is not. The throughput and latency also is something that scales, right? Like, latency never increases, but you can always scale the throughput. And finally, I believe just the ability to have something is formally proven that works is a very high value. We actually have a ridiculous amount of interest for Sui from the institutionals now. They've looked at Sui, they're very excited about it, they understand the system, they've read the papers, and it's starting to prove itself out. I believe there'll be a lot more news in that regard very soon.
Perfect. So you mentioned that the EVM is impossible to scale. But I want to ask kind of a tangential question to that. What are some takeaways that you guys have had from the EVM and the way that it's built? Because Ethereum is very clearly focused on something completely different from what is Sui focused on. Like, at the end of the day, you're both decentralized, but it's a different level or it's a different way of decentralization, I think is a good way to put it. That's one question. And the second question is, there's a lot of liquidity on Ethereum and on the EVM. And there's also, you said, like, there's a current small subset, but that subset is very used to MetaMask and Rabi and all of those tools. How are you guys going to work towards, I guess, like, increasing adoption and Sui, stealing some market share away from EVM? And you mentioned ZKlogin, but I want to also talk a bit about that later. But just apart from ZKlogin, how long do you think this is going to take for you guys to take away this market share spirit tech?
Good question. First thing is on numbers. There are only 25,000 active devs in Web3. That's pitiful. That's less devs than Facebook has, period. So we're so early that some VCs used to ask us the question, what is your ETH compatibility story? I used to feel like puking every time I heard that question, because it makes no sense, right? Like, what, 25,000 devs, who cares, right? It's so early. There are over 9 million JavaScript devs. We're going after those developers. We think that's the market to go after, not the small market of EVM devs. We just think EVM is such a tangential walk away from what traditional developers like to write code in, and it's not purpose-driven for a world where you want to deal with a multitude of assets. And by the way, I was actually a very big fan of ETH. I had a chance to invest early on. I don't know why I missed that opportunity. I would still got into it, but I missed out very, very early, very, very late at the same time. But I believe it was built for a different time. And now things are way more complicated. We want to deal with a lot more users. ETH was never meant to do that. And I believe, now Sui is actually one of the top destinations for ETH liquidity, which is something you brought up. more assets get bridged onto Sui and sold than any other chain. In fact, most times it's actually more assets being bridged into Sui than any other chain in the market. So I don't think we're having a problem with attracting ETH liquidity in that sense. You also touched on the experience. They're actually MetaMask snaps, right? There are some ETH users who are using a MetaMask snap for Sui, and they're using that without much of an issue. But I believe we win when we increase the size of the pie by going after a broader sense of users and broader sense of devs than just what's in the EVM space. But absolutely welcome every ecosystem. We believe like ultimately our goal is to broaden the pie. If we take market share from other chains, great, but really that's not the number one priority. We want to welcome a lot more devs that have never been in the space. We think that's where the opportunity is. You talk about adoption as well. Our goal from day one, we've always believed that gaming has the biggest opportunity to onboard more users into Web3 than anything else, bar none. Last year alone, over 3 billion gamers spent over $200 million on games. That's more than movies. It's more than music. It's a big enough space to go after those users, and we're working with some of the top studios in the world. These games have 10, 20, 30 million users, more users than Web3 as a whole. If we can onboard those gamers onto Sui using things like ZKlogin, sponsored transactions, where it's all hidden away, but guess what? They can trade, they can buy and sell assets, they can get residual value from their assets or engage with their games in new ways. We think that's a W. That's a big W for the space as a whole. So I think going up and front and center to people that install a wallet, download this, it's just a non-starter. You don't win the market share by getting users to do things they're not accustomed to doing.
That makes sense. How has the adoption for ZKlogin? I find ZKlogin very cool. I think it was like a great initiative by you guys. How well has that adoption gone? And are there some things that you would have done differently from the very beginning that now you realize?
So for history, ZKlogin was our attempt to get something called unilateral payments going, which is how do I send money to someone and they can receive it and redeem it without having to onboard. That is a big problem in finance, and we tried to solve that at Facebook. We couldn't make enough progress with this very hard problem. While at Mysten, we were able to resolve it, and we're very, very proud that ZKlogin works and it's fully vetted, and it's actually a novel protocol. It's gone really, really well. Interestingly, what has shocked me about ZKlogin is, that people actually store a lot of money using it. Our thought process was, okay, let's build it to onboard, the masses. The degens are never going to use this thing, right? Fine. They're always going to use MetaMask, going to use a hardware wallet, or they're going to use something that's paraphrase related. But we're finding people holding large balances in ZKlogin. That's because their view is, ultimately, my Google account is safe, it's multi-sig, it's safer than most of the things that I use, and it gives me portability. I can go from one wallet to the other and have the same balance ultimately. So we're finding the adoption to be going really, really well. Of course, I think the biggest adoption is going to come from traditional game studios, and most game studios are built on Twitter using ZKlogin. They're not asking you to download a wallet. They're not asking you to go and buy gas. They just log in your Google account as normal, and you have an account, or log in with an in-game account and it generates a ZKlogin account for you. And it's fully self-custodial as well. So that's a nuance about it. You're not using some middleware to create an account for your users. The users own their own account and they have their own agency to interact with the chain. So that's what's really excited us. And there's some surprises there, right? We never thought, degens would actually use it for day-to-day use in the chain.
Chaos Labs, the leading on-chain risk management firm, recently launched its new flagship Oracle product, Edge. Edge delivers integrated, high-precision risk and price data for any application with a market. After 2 months of securing Jupiter, Edge has already secured $30 billion in volume and more than 60% of all Solana perps volume. Edge is comprised of 3 components: high-precision price data with an integrated risk engine, automated delivery of real-time parameter adjustments on-chain, and secure delivery of custom data points via zero-knowledge proofs. Follow and reach out to Chaos Labs on X to learn more. Thanks again to Chaos Labs for sponsoring today's episode.
What's up, guys? Fuel Ignition is finally here. Fuel Ignition is a high-performance L2 solution that aims to solve both state sustainability and performant execution as an ETH rollup. Ignition is built upon the Fuel VM and a UTXO-based asset-centric architecture with ETH-grade security. Make sure to check out the growing Fuel ecosystem by participating in Phase 2 of the Fuel Points program today. Visit fuel.network to learn more.
You mentioned gaming again. You're excited about gaming. You guys are kind of partnering on a gaming device, the Sui Play device. I guess I'm curious here, why the focus on the hardware, and what's sort of the vision with this device? Do you think it leads to like greater adoption of gaming on Sui? Kind of take us down that path.
So, very good question. It's important to note that our bet is not just on the device. Our bet is on gaming, period. And right now, if you want to play a game, you have a choice to make, especially if you're in the PC world, right? Do I go with Steam? Do I go with Epic? How do I take this device with me? Today, you have a myriad of choices that aren't really great. So what we wanted to do is partner with Playtron. Playtron is actually found, some of the engineers actually work on Android very, very early. So highly respected team. They worked on Cyanogen mod. If you guys ever played around with that back in the days, you might be too young. But this is a mod you can install on your device directly rather than running the base OS. I use that as a gamer back in the days. I actually used to mod my phones all the time. But that's beside the point. What does Playtron let you do? Playtron is a gaming operating system. And this gaming operating system can be installed on your phone. It can be installed on a handheld device. It can be installed on your set-top box. It can be installed on your TV. It can go in a multitude of factors. And what it lets you do is to play Steam, Epic, also games from the creators of Final Fantasy as well. They're going to be, that's also going to be compatible, in addition to playing Web3 App Store games as well. So you don't have to choose. You don't have to say, I want to play a Web2 game or Web3 game. It doesn't matter. Games are games. And from our perspective, we want to usher in an era of ownership for games as a whole. So with this Playtron operating system, Sui is intrinsically embedded into the operating system. So you earn rewards if you play a Steam Web2 game or an Epic Web2 game, or you play a Web3 game. It doesn't matter. And ownership is just by using ZKlogin ultimately. We think that's a naturalistic way to onboard millions and millions of users into Web3 without having to think about chains or anything of the like. So our aspirations is broader than just a device. It's anywhere. You can boot the operating system with your Windows machine. It would run and operate games a lot better than your Windows machine would. So wherever you're playing games, we're betting on an operating system that gamers are going to want a better experience, and they don't have to make choices on which app store that they choose to use. Interestingly, the Playtron OS has its own app store that doesn't have all the restrictions that traditional app stores have as well. So Web3 games are running in floods to try and build on Playtron OS, because now they don't have to pay the high fees that they're charged right now for developing and porting games over on other platforms as a whole. So we're very bullish on that. We think that's the way to go. And so if you imagine Google and its relationship with Android is the operating system. It can be installed on any device, and we think many people will build a multitude of Playtron or Sui Play devices, and that's what we want. But Apple and Google also has the Pixel device, which is a premier device to make sure that the bar is kept sufficiently high for developers. So we are shipping a device that is of high quality and of relatively low cost, that allows people to have a device that they can go to as a reference to always play games at high fidelity. So that's what we are doing with the Sui Play device, and that's going to launch in 2025, early part of 2025. The device is already finished, actually. The hardware is already finished. The OS integration is ongoing right now. And it's going really well.
Very thorough. I guess maybe digging at that a little bit more, how has the reception of the device been so far? I guess if you can speak to like what pre-orders look like, if that's been promising. And then, you talked about, types of games wanting to build on Sui or on the OS device. All chains sort of want to get into this, or at least a lot of the high performance chains. There's a lot of focus on gaming as well. So what's that specific lane or avenue? Maybe it's mostly the tech, maybe it's other pieces of that, to incentivize games and Web3 developers and maybe even Web2 developers as well, to want to build games on Sui and on the device as well.
Interestingly, it's not hard to convince game devs to build on the Playtron device. One, they're not going to pay the fees that come with a traditional app store. And some of these games aren't exclusive to a particular app store either. So the net positive is the funds you saved, you can put that more into game development. You can put that more into rewards, having more interesting feedback loops for your games. So we think it's a net win for game devs. So we have a lot of developers already porting games to the Sui Play device, and we'll be announcing more in the next coming set of months as well. Pre-orders are going really well, about close to 3,000 devices ordered. We actually have a ton of interest of people who want to do selling to retail at a mass scale. We wanted to focus on our early adopters first before going to mass scale. We also have conversations with carriers who want to find a way to carry this device and offer it as part of a plan for purchases of data. So our aspirations are really, really big. It's not just, hey, a bunch of DJs buying a game device. It's let's get this into the hands of everybody possible. So there's a lot of work to be done, but early signs are very positive. We're talking to some of the largest companies in the world in regards to this device.
Fantastic. I'm happy we kind of took the conversation to this direction, but I want to fully focus a bit on building on Sui, and specifically, how important do you think going forward for Sui it's going to be to focus more on BD and ecosystem growth through either incentive programs or through maybe small incubation programs for you to get more apps and more builders on Sui? Apart from the Move language, do you guys have anything planned?
So Sui, from a developer standpoint, I believe Move as a whole is about 7% of the active devs in Web3. So from 0 to 7%, like, people should take notice. That's pretty serious. Whether it's by us or the ecosystem partners, I mean, Sui is by far the largest Move ecosystem. But the more people build on Move, I think the more beneficial it is for Mysten, for Sui as a whole, ultimately. So adoption is looking really good. We've only been live for like 17, 18 months. So give us a chance. We're still new, but we're like number 6 on daily volume and 8 on TVL. Like, all the metrics are looking really, really good for Sui. So very, very proud about that. But what we want is to broaden the devs beyond what we have today, from going beyond just the Web3 devs as a whole. So in terms of growing the ecosystem, we've announced partnerships with the likes of Circle USDC. So USDC is now native on Sui. At the end of this month, you heard some of the top world exchanges launching the ability to deposit and withdraw funds in USDC for Sui specifically. So we're very, very happy about that. Stablecoins are one of the best use cases for blockchains, and we think that having a native stablecoin via Agora USD now, Circle USD, and FDUSD, that expands the surface area of what users have in terms of choice by means of stablecoins. Games is one of our biggest bets. So Society, which is a AAA game, it's coming live early next year. It's going to be launched on a Sui Play X1 as well, by the way. Dark Times, E4C, Fan of Salvation. These are people who built Riot Games, right? Like, so these are top tier game studios building on Sui. So our thesis is going to keep going along those lines. We believe gaming will really put DeFi on a hockey stick from a large perspective. We think DeFi is great from an infrastructure perspective, but what you want are real users leveraging it in a very transparent way, right? So we think that's going to drive the DeFi adoption on Sui further from what it's already driven already. That's our big bet. Finance as well, and RWA. Those are the areas that we're really indexing on. So we have a number of RWA platforms are soon to be launched on Sui. We'll be announcing those soon. But we think that's RWA, for me, I still think it's like a 2 to 3 year bet as it grows, because ultimately what matters is liquidity. And to touch on liquidity, this is why we built DeepBook. DeepBook was a partnership between Mysten and a number of ecosystem partners to have a fully on-chain order book for once that works, right? So if you want to trade in size, you want to trade very, very fast, you want to trade as a professional trader, CLAMMs aren't as efficient for doing that. They're great for long-tail assets, but if you want to trade high liquid assets, tier 1 assets, like Sol, Sui, Facebook, Google, whatever, you cannot do that on a CLAMM. So having a central limit order book, a crankless central limit order book, is the way to go. So Sui has a fully permissionless central limit order book called DeepBook that recently TGE'd a couple of days ago, and that is going to be the backbone of liquidity for Sui. Every CLAMM is plugged into it, so they can tap into additional liquidity when they don't have liquidity. So anybody can build on top of DeepBook. So if you want to imagine a world where you're tapping your credit card to make payments or your debit card to make payments, or you need to do large FX swaps, you're going to need a central limit order book to do that at that kind of scale. So Sui is already has that from day one. Took a lot of inspiration from a team at that built Serum, and they're actually very helpful with some of the ideas on how we can improve on the design. So it's highly performant with very, very low fees. I think we showed that to trade on DeepBook. to buy $5,000 worth of USDC or to swap USDC to USDT way cheaper on Deepbook than it would be on a centralized exchange.
Perfect. I want to talk a bit about Deepbook later, but I first want to touch up on something you said. So you said you want to go for payments, which I think is very good. It's like, I agree. But often we get people on the podcast who think that payments are kind of a low value transaction compared to some of the bigger DeFi transactions that you might need. First of all, do you agree with that? Second of all,
That doesn't make any sense. Look, reality is what you're going for is consumers, right? Like, what is the goal? You want to make things easy for consumers. And if you have a platform that onboard consumers easily, allows them to do their day-to-day basic things, then you can then expand on to doing more interesting things for them. You cannot go for just the big tickets and then not deal with the lower tickets. So this is why for us, like, the number of things matter. You can't have a maximum throughput, and latency needs to be fast in the website load. And when you have that, you broaden the surface area or use cases that you can deal with. So when you have a very low bandwidth chain with high fees, then of course you could only deal with high value transactions, right? And things that really resemble just pure gambling. But when you have a very low cost chain that doesn't have a restriction on throughput and effectively allows you to trade at, as fast as you absolutely can, then you can do microtransactions, then you can do payments, then you can do all these things that people say are very low value, but are essential for any economy. So I disagree. Like, you want to have payments, you want to deal with the lowest, like the very, very, broad set of use cases. So you can onboard consumers into the broader sense of use cases. For example, it's so cheap on Sui today, and it's so fast to transact on Sui, that if I allow you to send 50 cents or 5 cents, then maybe you might trust Sui to do your concert tickets. Now I can swap concert tickets with my friend. I could do a marketplace, so trading concert tickets as a result. But if my fees are $3 or maybe $3, and when it's very congested, it's now $10, well, I'm never going to do anything like that. So I think the majority of chains have that congestion issue. If you take a look in Sol, for example, more than 70% of the fees are basically priority fees, which means there is intrinsic congestion. You are paying more because the chain is full. So you're paying more to get your transaction ahead. Sui does not have that. So if you're going to deal with the world's transactions, you need to be able to intrinsically handle congestion in a very streamlined way. So Sui has multiple mechanisms that does that better than other chains. So hopefully I answered your question. I believe payments is huge. Payments is the way. In our world, when we were trying to build a Facebook, we wanted to make payments as easy as sending an email. Now with Sui and ZKlogin, just tell me your email address and I can email money to you and you can receive it without ever having to onboard and offboard anywhere else.
Awesome. That makes a ton of sense. I guess looking back, from Facebook and then to Mysten Labs Sui, you've launched, we're 16, 18 months out now. Since the mainnet, are there any key things that you think you guys really nailed and got right? And then on the flip side, are there any things you think, you maybe missed on or got wrong? And going forward, like on those things that you got wrong, like, what's the fix, or where are you going to focus on next to kind of improve going forward?
Yeah, there are two things we got right and wrong, and I think they're probably the same thing. The first thing we did or didn't do is we didn't do an airdrop for Sui. And we got lambasted for that in a big, big way, right? We're very, very clear from day one. We're not going to do an airdrop. We don't think it makes sense for our project. We are going to build a real community. It will take more time. And it ended up playing out the way we expected, right? So we announced the network. We went live. We did TGE. Without people were able to purchase a token for really low price. But what we ended up doing is onboarding real believers in our ecosystem. And the airdrop hunters went elsewhere and played out elsewhere, right? So I think our community, if you look at the Sui community now, it's very loud, it's very strong, it's very determined, very focused on the technology, understands what we're trying to do. That's our goal. And I think if you do an airdrop for your layer one, then ultimately what you do is you encourage the lowest common denominator of users. People always say it's marketing, but realistically, no, it's not, right? You really introduce the lowest common denominator to your network that don't care about your network, and then they go elsewhere. If you benchmark Sui against other projects that launch in the same time frame, or plus or minus 6 months, Sui's done way better than every single one of them on every single measurable metric. So I think that was the thing we did right, not doing an airdrop. The thing we did wrong, though, is we missed out on a community aspect that does come with that, right? So I believe we're a bit slower to onboard community as a result. Our thesis was like, look, we're going to build the best platform, to build the best possible tech, and onboard the best users onto the platform. But given the nature of open source software, and then the notions of tokens, there is an element of ensuring that you can keep the community abreast of your developments. And we're unable to probably articulate some of our best selling points early on because we're very, very, they wanted high level descriptions. We're going to low level, right? And I think now we've started to bridge the gap via community members, ambassadors, and everything else related. So I think we did a great job of not doing airdrop, but we might have missed the boat in terms of like trying to, bring the community along with our developments. And I think we've caught up there, and we'd love to see us make even more progress there.
That's a great call out. Airdrop's definitely highly contentious within the space, both on the good side and the bad side. You mentioned, community being that was a big kind of focal point here. I guess given the points you made, like going forward, how are you guys going to kind of further build out that community? And then two, like what are some ways, or are there any specific ways you're thinking about leveraging that community to kind of, keep your success on track and build into the future?
So Sui succeeds when it becomes, a utility, not a commodity. It succeeds when that happens, right? And what I mean by that is the apps need to win. You need applications that drive users to use Sui on a daily basis in a very transparent way. So it should be less about Sui success. Like, I don't say this internet is great because I'm on AT&T fiber. I just say I'm using the internet. It works, right? And Sui needs to be that layer, which is why we say our goal is a universal coordination layer for the internet, that the applications built on top of Sui are leveraging the benefits of Sui on a day-to-day basis. And Sui is used to fund the transactions as a result. And that's where Sui ultimately succeeds. And community is going to take a multitude of forms. There's going to be the crypto native community that exists today, and that's going to keep growing. But that's going to reach a peak, right? Like the crypto natives can only grow so much because it's a different paradigm for how community is built than a lot of other mechanisms like Facebook or Google or TikTok, whatever. But I do believe what we want to do is help our applications build their own intrinsic communities, right? Like if you're building a DeFi app, there's a different form of community you need from if you're building, MoviePass, for example, who's partnering to change how movies are funded and ultimately, users engage with films and shop movies moving forward. Or if you engage with like Team Liquid, who is really caring more about onboarding their community and keeping them around for a lot longer and growing the influence of their communities as a whole. So it's going to take a different form. And I think the next set of social media will be built on top of crypto, on top of blockchains, because how you engage your community, how you reward your community, how you take them along, and how you keep them loyal is going to fundamentally shift. So I believe Sui's community is strong. It keeps growing. I think it's going to keep growing. But ultimately, the way in which we succeed is move Sui from being what it is today to actually being a daily utility, where you use on a day-to-day basis. It's under the hood. You have no clue you're using it, but it drives a lot of economic value for the world, ultimately.
That makes a lot of sense. I think we're getting into mentioning, apps and utilities here again. So I guess, going back to, you mentioned DeepBook earlier. How much, or I guess there's maybe different ways to think about this, but given apps and developers sort of building on Sui or within the ecosystem, how much help and support as a team, do you guys provide to apps? Obviously, there's maybe some projects where you're more involved and others where you're not. And how impactful do you think that has been, helping out with maybe DeepBook, for example?
Yeah. So our goal over the time is that Mysten becomes less influential with Sui, but helps in technology direction, but the ecosystem starts to formulate itself and organize itself. And I think Solana's done a phenomenal job in that, right? They've got a great model on how you do that, and we could take a lot of learnings from them and how they succeeded there. But today, we do actually help projects, right? Whether it's in the form of community grants, whether it's in the form of partnering with them with the rest of the ecosystem projects, whether it's a form of co-marketing, investment, you name it, any number of what's required. And teams are in different stages of development. So the kind of help teams need is going to be very different. One of the things we also have in-house is a solutions engineering team at Mysten, and they help new partners to Web3 onboard really, really quickly, whether we build a demo for them, help them understand, build a set of APIs to ease integration, just as common things you expect to help people onboard really, really, really rapidly. We're building a ton of AI tools as well to help devs build on Move very, very quickly. One of the tools called Bugdar. Bugdar is going to help reduce the cost of auditing. So as you write in code, you can do your PR request and it will give you an idea of typical bugs that are in the code you've written and give you suggestions on how you can fix it. So reducing the barrier to entry for dev tools is going to be another area in which we invest as well. But ultimately, we give a number of different things to help the ecosystem, and that will change over time. And our hope is, as the ecosystem matures, it's only 18 months into it, it starts to really self-organize and be more and more decentralized in the way in which it coordinates.
Gotcha. Makes total sense. I guess, and let's going back to another thing that I think we mentioned earlier on. Talked about Walrus and DA a little bit at the beginning. This was a somewhat more of a recent launch. I guess, what is the reasoning or the use case, the utility behind Walrus, and what does it enable for Sui apps building on Sui, and I guess down the road, like users and the utility there?
So the first thing is what Walrus isn't. Walrus isn't a middle finger to Google, Amazon, and all the services that are around. I believe there's value in having certain centralized services that exist today, and they'll always be there. The problem comes when you want to coordinate user actions against assets in a very permissionless way. I don't believe centralized entities can ever compete with what we're building in regards to Walrus in that regard. So you have a platform now that is fully decentralized. It's going to be very low cost storage and allows you to organize users around data using some programmable mechanisms like smart contracts. So if you want to build and if you want to share data, if you want to build economics around data, you cannot do that on a centralized service. Or can you do that in a way that's really open and permissionless? So Walrus is our answer to that. It is a decentralized blob storage that allows you to store petabytes, if not exabytes of data. You as a developer in the Web3 space can host your entire front end on Walrus and run it directly from Walrus. And then you have a domain name system called SuiNS that you'd use to resolve the location of your website. So now you're not going to be susceptible to DNS attacks that happen in traditional Web 2. So you can have a website that the wallet knows it's interacting directly with an application that's safe and secure. So the amount of security you get is a lot higher. If you're in government or if you're running an application that requires a high amount of certainty around what you're engaging with, Walrus is the way to go. So to hack a Walrus website is different from hacking, a website hosted on Google, Amazon, right? Those companies, or let's say using a tier 1, a tier 2, or tier 3 provider, you can hack some server and gain access to data and change things. With Walrus, you have hundreds, if not thousands of nodes, and to hack it, you need to be able to hack the key, the private key. We know how to secure private keys better than we know how to secure a multitude of servers, right? That could be run by any centralized body. So we think the attack vectors on Walrus are thinner than the attack vectors you have on centralized service providers. So I believe the amount of use cases for Walrus will broaden in regards to that. If you care about data integrity, if you want to, for example, we partner with a particular number of media organizations, and Decrypt being one of the top ones, who are going to move their entire website onto Walrus. The resolution will be on Walrus, the rendering will be on Walrus. Every image they post, every article they post can be signed using ZKlogin. So you know that John at Blockworks wrote an article, and you know that the image that he posted was done on a particular date. It can't be changed. So if you want to now run analytical, you want to run AI on top of that, you've got a very strong source of data that has high integrity to work off. So I think that starts to matter in the large scheme of things. And these are things that are very, very hard to do with centralized service providers. Second, another thing is, let's say I need to provide storage for data for some fixed amount of time. I'm under contractual obligation to provide availability of data for some fixed period of time. You could do that on Walrus, whereas you have to do audits with centralized service providers. You don't need an audit. You get a hash and you get a proof that this data will be available for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, who knows, right? So these are things that are very hard to do with centralized services, but they'll be afforded to you by Walrus. And I think Walrus is going to be the cheapest place to do this. It's going to be the most composable way to do this. You can now build, let's say you build your DEX and you have your front end of your DEX running on Walrus. You can write a smart contract that every trading fee goes to pay the storage fee for your for your website, and you never have to pay service fees again for running a DEX. So there are multitude of things that you can coordinate automatically using Walrus that you just can't do. Like smart contracts don't sign deals with AWS, right? It's not possible, but they can do one with a decentralized autonomous storage network.
Perfect. I just like preventing some front-end hacks would be perfect, like just off that base level. So I'm excited to see how Walrus. How's the adoption been so far, apart from Decrypt and some other media sites?
So interestingly, we're at ETH event right now, and more than 80% of the projects decided to hack on Walrus. So it has influence beyond your Sui, which is our goal, right? It's the ETH guys are loving Walrus. It also has a lot of value. The guys who are building rollups love Walrus because they can use it as an availability layer. Anybody building a website that wants to do anything regarding AI, they're interested about Walrus. So the adoption is really, really good. We're very happy about it. This is just testnet. We haven't even started the next phase of testnet, which should be more exciting yet. But it's looking really good. We had a hackathon as well that had over 60 submissions, very high value submissions. If you go to walrus.xyz, there's a link that shows you all the submissions and the video walkthrough. People are building stuff that we never thought would be possible, but that's cool. That's the whole point, right? It's a platform.
Perfect. Adeniyi, I want to take a step away from Mysten Labs and Sui and Walrus, and I want to ask you about your opinions about some of the things we're seeing in crypto right now. Do you think rollups were a good way to scale Ethereum? Is my first one.
So my first statement there is I believe the only network that needs rollups or layer 2s is ETH, right? Because if you didn't get it right first time, you sure dang way should be getting it right the second or third time now, right? So I don't think anyone has an excuse. They should build a layer 1 that scales. So I do think you need alternative mechanisms to scale ETH because ETH is not going to scale anytime soon. And you have to provide a solution to that ecosystem because they want to be on ETH. And I believe whether I'm not opinionated on whether it's a roll up or some other mechanism, but I do think anything other than just using base ETH is better than using ETH from our perspective. But I do question some of the centralized natures of what we're seeing. We think they're making a lot of security compromises that we wouldn't make. We just wouldn't make. But again, each to their own.
That makes sense. My second thing is you mentioned congestion fees on Solana being priority fees costing 70% because there's a lot of congestion on Solana. How do you see this being an issue in the future, maybe as things ramp up? How Sui did it differently? How would you have done it differently as well? Like for Solana, apart from ignore Solana, go to Sui, what would be some changes that you would have made?
So first thing is actually Solana actually did a better job than most people in the ecosystem for congestion, right? I actually think the congestion mechanism for Sol is probably going to be better than what Aptos has, for example, right? Looking at the way they've done it. But beyond that, they did the best that they could with the architecture they had at the time. We are lucky in the sense that we are not first. So we're able to take a lot of learnings of what people had built. And our background is in programming languages, it's in data pipelines, it's in big data, it's in building search, it's in building large-scale infrastructure. We know how to do that. So our background is from the space where we deal with large scales of data all the time. And dealing with congestion is something that you have to deal with large-scale systems. It's not unique to Web3. And our view is the pipelining that people have built for how you ingest data, process, validate, execute, we think that pipeline is entirely wrong. Sui takes a much more different approach to how we pipeline that whole process for executing transactions on a blockchain. And that allows us to have, the merkleization of state. Well, in fact, sorry, the verification of state is ultimately not it's something that can be done in parallel, whereas other chains have a more sequential mechanism to doing that. In fact, the block production thing is what we think is actually going to slow most people down. The fact that you have to agree on a block and then propose it. Once you agree on a block, then you make it. People are always talking about, hey, we have 500 milliseconds block production or what? Who cares? That doesn't mean anything. That just means you can create a block fast. It doesn't mean you get finality fast, right? Whereas for us, block production or what we call checkpointing is done after the fact. We can agree a lot faster, but checkpointing is an auditing thing that's done after the fact. So it's not on a critical path. which means we have no limit to how we can scale our network ultimately. So that is a design decision we took differently. We think it's very, very hard to go back and design your system to do that. It is a monumental engineering effort to redesign your protocol to go and do what we've done. But we welcome people to do that, like fork Sui and do something different, right? So, but I think the design decisions have been taken from other platforms. I've unfortunately pegged them into a particular corner for how you scale, which is why they'll try to do parallel execution in an optimistic way on a single machine. Well, the world doesn't work on single machines. The world has always worked on the ability to add more machines with scale. So what if you buy the most expensive CPU? You just reduce the surface area of users that can process your network, right? But for us, you can have 10, 15 cheap machines and start to scale. That's the way in which we've gone about it, rather than assuming everybody's just going to buy the single machine. So I think that design decision is the way to go, and it's going to allow us to power the internet of ownership for the internet, not what everyone else has built today.
I think that makes sense. It's a really good answer. And it reminded me of something that I think another analyst on the team would be upset if I didn't ask about. So I've been hearing a lot about DAG Based Consensus. Do you want to kind of run over what that is and what it enables you guys to do better than other people?
If I try to explain it, I'll butcher it because I don't have Evan or George on the call. They are way better at explaining this stuff than I am. Okay, I'll give you a high level, at least the highest level possible, right? Interestingly, for Sui, what we're having now is universities, or in America you call it colleges. I think you can call it universities as well in America. They're starting to teach our DAG-based approach to consensus because Mysten for them is the first consensus algorithm that they can explain in a very simple way to their students, and they get it. It is way easier to understand in Grok than the previous mechanism for consensus. So rather than it uses a directional acyclic graph as a means of agreeing on what you're going to commit to for each round. That is very different from what exists before. And the unique thing about Mysten, unlike other consensus protocols, they're normally leader-based consensus protocols. So there's a leader that you elect. So you know who you're going to DDoS any given time, right? So it's easy to shut down any of these leader-based systems. Just know who the leader is going to be and you can DDoS them. It can happen quite frequently. Whereas with the DAG-based system that we've developed, you can have a multitude of leaders, right, at any given time. So it's impossible to shut down the network. And in fact, it's stronger against any kind of network forks or network attacks than other protocols that exist today. So it's a much more robust mechanism. It's easier to understand. It's easier to formally prove that it works as a result. And we have a number of upgrades coming to Mysten in the coming months to make it even more faster than what we've done at mainnet. But I can't explain the details of how it works as good as George or Sam or Costas can. So I'll probably pass on that for now in an effort not to give people wrong information.
Yep. No, that's great. I think the high level is helpful here just to give people the flavor. I guess just to wrap things up, we've covered a lot of stuff here. And you're able to, I think you speak pretty quickly. So we're able to shove in quite a bit of info, which was great. I guess for you guys, for Mysten, for Sui, for Walrus, whatever it may be, what's coming up next for you guys? What are the big focuses, whether it is technical strategy, specific products, et cetera? Like, what do you want to showcase?
Number of things. Number one, we believe Sui will be the best place to trade, period, across all Web3 ecosystems. So there's going to be a lot of work announcements coming up soon in regards to DeepBook. That's going to scale out significantly in terms of volume and trade participation, and we're very excited about that. We've partnered with Axelar, for example, who are going to be running Squid off DeepBook, where you can actually do cross-chain swaps directly and settled on Walrus. So we believe if you want to buy Sol, ETH, BTC, whatever, you'll be able to do that directly on Walrus, no matter what chain that you're on. I keep saying Walrus. You'll be able to do that directly on DeepBook, no matter what chain that you're on, and that's what we're very excited about. We want traders in Web3 to have the best venue possible to trade. Secondly, we believe user adoption is key. So we're very focused on onboarding the next set of games that are going to go live on Sui and showcasing the benefits of having ownership intrinsic to the gameplay. We think we're going to see a lot of growth next year in terms of the user base of Sui. And we believe it's going to be actually the most diverse user base that you have in Web3. So net new users into Web3, not just degens, but are using all the degen stuff that they care about. Swaps, NFTs, you name it. The other thing is focused on Walrus mainnet. Right now, we announced the testnet for Walrus yesterday. It's gone actually really, really well. We're seeing a lot of adoption, a lot of excitement. Next will be an incentivized testnet, and after that, then we'll ship this baby off to mainnet. So very excited about growing the storage space. But I think the amount of use cases that we're seeing, the amount of inbound we're seeing for Walrus is something that we're not even staffed to handle. So we're trying to figure out how to grow our team to make sure that we can adequately deal with people's inquiries and get them set up for success very, very quickly. So very excited about growing the adoption of Deepbook, and every major protocol in Sui, DeFi protocol in Sui is already integrated into Deepbook. It's not competing with projects, it's actually uplifting the entire ecosystem. Secondly, we are excited about growing the user base from gaming. We think that's going to be a massive growth vector for Sui next year. And we're very excited about getting Walrus all the way to mainnet. And that's going to be the central to company's focus over the next 3 to 6 months.
Fantastic. Yeah, lots of big plans. I'm excited for you guys.
We're excited too. I think it's we're elated that the adoption of Sui is looking as good as it is. We're elated that devs are finding value. We over-index on devs for the right reasons, and now we're focusing on building the best community in the space as well. So we've got a lot of great people who have built ahead of us in that space, and we'll take a lot of learnings from them and keep building.
Fantastic. Thanks for coming on, Adeniyi.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
It was great having you on.